In today's test, we pose the question, how impulsive are you? Why not test yourself and find out? From Hollywood, it's the Game Game. The game that reveals a little bit more about your favorite celebrities and yourself. Now get your pencil and paper ready and join this 24-year-old housewife and model from Washington, D.C., who worked as a stewardess for 5 years, Miss Carrie Hoover. Today, she takes a test to compare her with this television and film star who appears weekly in the very successful series The Virginian, Mr. Doug McClure. This beautiful and talented actress who stars in the motion picture #1, Miss Jessica Walter. And this handsome actor, now starring in the new feature film Skullduggery, Mr. Burt Reynolds. And here's your host, the star of our show, Mr. Jim McKrell.
Thank you. Today we're going to ask a series of 5 questions to find out how impulsive are you. Naturally, 5 questions cannot serve as a psychological examination, but if you take the test along with our panel, you may learn something about yourself. For our contestant, this is a chance to find out how she compares to our celebrity panel. Now, Carrie, it's up to you to choose how you think you will score, lower or higher than our celebrity guest. The amount of money you receive at the end of the game will depend on that guess. So which score do you want to predict for yourself, lower or high?
Higher.
High?
I definitely think I'd be much higher. They all look so calm and cool, and I think I'm pretty impulsive right now.
All right, you chose high, Carrie. That means you'll receive $25 for each celebrity you tie or outscore, or $100 if you are more impulsive than all 3. Let's get started with today's game. Remember, we're testing you to see how impulsive are you, so write down your answers as we go along. The first question is, what are you most apt to remark in the middle of an experiment? A, what was that? B, just as I suspected. C, what have I left out? Or D, I may just pull this off. We'll start this round off with Doug McClure.
With me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Why am I always first? Well, what would I do if an experiment, huh?
What are you most apt to remark in the middle of an experiment?
Well, what was that? That was a cannon that went on. Just as I expected, I don't think I would say that because I usually, I think I would say C, what have I left out?
What have I left out?
Yeah, I don't know why, but that's what I think I'd say.
All right, thank you, Doug. Jessica Walter.
In the middle of an experiment, what would I say? Well, I couldn't say just as I expected because if I were experimenting, I wouldn't expect anything. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that takes care of that one. Now, let's see. What have I left out? No, too confident for that. I mean, just put, no, I think I'd say, what was that?
Cannon?
A cannon. Hark, I hear the cannons roar. I think I'd say that.
What was that?
What was that?
All right, thank you, Jessica. Burt Reynolds.
Well, I couldn't say just as I expected because I'd be in the middle of an experiment. Did you say that?
Yes.
What was that?
Listen well.
Yes, I do. What was that? I would say, of course, it would depend on the experiment. But I would say I may just pull this off.
I think that's what he'd say.
We're in a lot of trouble.
All right. Burt Reynolds says D. I may just pull this off. Carrie, what are you most apt to remark in the middle of an experiment?
Well, being the kind of person I am, I think I'd ask, what have I left out? Because I act impulsively or what have you, and then all of a sudden I think, uh-oh, forgot something. So I think I'd have to agree.
What have I left out?
What have I left out?
All right, thank you, Carrie. Now let's see what our researchers have to say about the answers. The impulsive individual rarely has much control over experimental ventures in his life. Thus, if you picked B, just as I suspected, you get 0. If you chose D, as Burt Reynolds did, I may just pull this off, you score 5 points. If you selected C, as our contestant Carrie did and as Doug McClure did, what have I left out, you get 10 points. But if you said A, as Jessica Walter did, what was that, you score 15 points. And now let's move on to question number 2, which is, if you had to do it over again, would you A, try more things, B, have more fun, C, be more selective, or D, be more careful? And let's give you a few moments to think about that while we take this pause. Our subject for today is how impulsive are you, and our contestant Carrie has predicted she'll score higher than our celebrity panel. So let's see how you all do on question number 2, which is, if you had to do it over again, would you A, try more things, B, have more fun, C, be more selective, or D, be more careful? And we'll start this round off with Jessica Walter.
Oh, let's see. If I had to do it over again, is that the question?
That's
it?
right.
I have a lot of fun, and I think I'm selective. No. Yes, I do think I'm selective, and I think I'm careful. So I think I could only say I'd try more things because I do everything else. So that would be my answer. Try more things.
All right, Jessica Walter says A, try more things. Burt Reynolds.
I think I'd try Jessica Walters. No, I'd try more. I don't know what the it is, you see.
That's what she
Obviously, I don't, and you're not going to tell me. But if it was something really important, like marriage, and we can talk to Doug about that, I would be more careful the second time.
Around.
Oh, yes.
All right, Burt Reynolds says D, be more careful. Doug McClure, if you had to do it over again, would you?
You'd be more careful.
I don't want to do it over again. But if I had to do it over again, I certainly would like to have fun if I was going to do it again. And I hope I'd be selective, and I hope I'd be careful, but I don't know what more there is to try, but I'd sure like to try. I'd probably try more things. Uh-huh.
All right, Doug. Carrie, if you had to do it over again, what would you do?
Well, I don't think I agree with any of them. I'd have to say I'd be more careful. You know how sometimes you just put
I would
your...
like to have been careful, but...
You weren't too careful. No,
No.
that's true. But have you ever... I know something the audience doesn't know.
Well, let's don't tell them.
No, but I...
Okay,
We got
Carrie.
married, huh? Is that what you're saying?
No, but have you ever put your foot in your mouth after you've said something you shouldn't have or done something you shouldn't, and then all of a sudden you wished you hadn't? Well, I do it all the time, so I'd definitely be more careful.
Okay, Jessica. Thank you, Carrie. Now that all of our guests have answered and you at home have made your choices, let's see what the answer is to this question. The impulsive personality makes an individual regret what he didn't do much more than what he did. Thus, if you pick C, be more selective, which none of our guests did, you get a 0. If you chose D, as our contestant Carrie did and as Burt Reynolds did, be more careful, you score 5 points. If you selected B, have more fun, you get 10 points. But if you decided on A, as Doug McClure did and as Jessica Walter did, try more things, you score 15 points. Now we're testing to see how impulsive are you, so get ready to write down your answers to the third question, which is,
help that.
how do you feel right after you've lost your composure? A, tense, B, apologetic, C, embarrassed, or D, amused? And we'll start this round off with Burt Reynolds.
Well, I never have. Kirk Douglas and I are the only two guys that have never, ever lost. No, as a matter of fact,
That's right.
I blow it, I blow it all the time, as a matter of fact. And when I do, I wished I could be amused, because that's the thing you should do, you see. But I never am. And I'm embarrassed, that's true. I'm never apologetic.
He never is.
Has
know
no
him well.
friends, but he's never... No.
I did have one. I get very tense when I blow it. Isn't that your question? What happens when you blow it?
How do you feel right after you've lost your composure?
Don't hit him.
That's right, the same thing. I'm getting tense right now.
All right, Burt Reynolds says A, tense. Doug McClure,
What's the question?
how do you feel right after you've lost your composure?
Lousy.
Oh, it's my turn. Well, I really don't laugh too much when I blow it, and I can't think of anything to say to apologize, and I usually get embarrassed. No, I don't. I get like Bert, tense. No, I'm really embarrassed. I want to be tense like Bert, but I can't be Bert. Lancaster. I'm embarrassed because right now I've blown it. I'm embarrassed. That's it. I'm embarrassed. Shocking pink all over.
All right, thank you, Doug. Doug McClure says C, embarrassed. Jessica Walter.
What was the question? How do you feel when you've lost your temper?
How do you feel right after you've lost your composure?
Oh, right after you've lost your composure. Well, you have to be tense to lose your composure. And I wish I could be amused when I lose my composure, but I usually don't think it's very funny. And I get apologetic because usually when I lose my temper, I don't mean to and I hurt somebody and then I feel awful and I apologize. So I'd say apologetic.
Apologetic.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Carrie, how do you feel right after you've lost your composure?
I said lousy. Well, I would have to say tense, apologetic, embarrassed, and amused. Will that do it?
No.
I have some friends that really embarrass me. They make me feel like an idiot, sort of, you know.
Huh.
So, and I don't apologize. They know that I'm the way I am.
An idiot?
Strange, you know. So I would have to say embarrassed because I'm not very amused.
Okay. C, embarrassed. Thank you, Carrie. That concludes the answers from our guests, so let's find out how to score those answers and yours at home. This question is a test of how easily your emotions change, since the impulsive person is generally emotionally changeable. Thus, if you picked A, tense, as Burt Reynolds did, you get 0. If you chose C, embarrassed, as our contestant Carrie did, and as Doug McClure did, you score 5 points. If you selected B, apologetic, as Jessica Walter did, you get 10 points. But if you said D, amused, you score 15 points. And now let's move right on to the fourth question of the day, which is...
I am a loser.
What do you have the hardest time doing for yourself? A, making a decision. B, planning an evening. C, satisfying yourself. Or D, finishing up. And we'll hear what our guests have to say about that right after this part. Let's take a moment now to find out what prize we have in store for our contestant, Carrie. Here's Johnny Jacobs.
Thank you, Jim. Our contestant for today will receive an assortment of Super Stereo 8-track cartridges from NAL, the North American Leisure Corporation, featuring America's top recording artists. And we're including a stereo tape unit from the Automatic Radio Company. And now back to Jim McKrell and the Game Game.
Thank you, Johnny. And today's quiz for How Impulsive Are You? Our fourth question is, what do you have the hardest time doing for yourself? A, making a decision. B, planning an evening. C, satisfying yourself. Or D, finishing up. And we'll start this round off with Doug McClure.
Well, the hardest thing I have to, let's see, it's difficult for me to make decisions sometimes. Planning an evening, oh, I can do that. That's not too hard for me. And I can usually satisfy myself. I'm usually pretty satisfied with myself. Said to myself yesterday, self, are you satisfied? And he said, yeah. Finishing up? What does that mean, Bert? Finishing up. This show is really kidding.
You're in such trouble.
I know.
can't tell you.
I think probably, what, finishing up? It's making a decision. That's like saying, you know, it's hard for me to say no. So making a decision is probably the toughest thing for me to do.
That's what I thought.
Well,
Hey,
it took a
making
long
decision. Thank you, Doug. Jessica Walter.
Well, I'd have to say probably that too, because planning an evening involves a decision, and I have a terrible time doing that. And satisfying myself, I never know if I like the work I've done or I don't, and I have to have people tell me, which is bad. And finishing up, I never finish up things. I always leave it. So I'd have to say making a decision because it encompasses all three.
All right, Jessica Walter says A, making a decision. Burt Reynolds.
Well, I don't have any trouble making decisions. That's why I'll be here for the next 20 minutes trying to figure out. Playing an evening, I always know where I'm going to go. It's finishing up that's tough to do. Satisfying yourself, that sounds like such a selfish thing to say. And God knows I wouldn't be that. I'd say finishing up.
Finishing up.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Bert.
I don't know what that means, but that's what
Hey, Carrie, what do you have the hardest time doing for yourself?
Well, let me see.
All right.
It's very hard to satisfy myself. That wasn't funny. Planning an evening, I get to do that once a week. I think making a decision would be the very hardest thing because I always have to have somebody else do it for me.
All right, Abe, making a decision. Thank you, Carrie. That concludes the answers from our guests. So let's find out how to score those answers and yours at home. Impulsiveness is frequently associated with a basic lack of discipline. Thus, if you chose, as our contestant Carrie did, as Doug McClure did, and as Jessica Walter did, A, making a decision, you get 0. If you pick C, satisfying yourself, you score 5 points. If you selected D, as Burt Reynolds did, finishing up, you get 10 points. And if you decided on B, planning an evening, you score 15 points. And here's the last question of the day before we find out how impulsive are you. Remember, Carrie, you predicted you would score high, so let's see if you're right. The question is, complete this sentence. If there's one thing I can't control, it's A, my love life, B, my tongue, C, my imagination, or D, my sense of humor. We'll start this round off with Jessica Walter.
Oh, must you? All right, no. If there's one thing I can't control, well, of course, I like to think everything's under control, but sometimes I must say I do say things I don't mean. So I'd have to say, if you'll forgive me, my tongue.
B, your tongue.
You should pardon the expression, yes.
All right.
Okay.
Jessica Walter says B, my tongue. We'll go to Burt Reynolds.
I wouldn't touch that line with a 10-foot pole. I have pretty good control over my love life. And sense of humor, that's my favorite thing, is a sense of humor. From other people. That and their tongue, of course. I would say my imagination I can't control.
Your imagination.
Yes, right now I think I'm somewhere else. And I've just been reminded of that.
All right, Burt Reynolds says C, my imagination. Doug McClure.
Yes. Well, it's
We have to hurry.
Oh, we have to hurry. Bert took all the time up. I think it probably, and I hate to say it, my hardest thing for me to control is probably my tongue.
B, your tongue.
I say things too I don't mean.
You and I agree a lot, have you noticed?
I know.
Yeah.
We gotta hurry up.
Two
no more
sickies.
time.
All right, Doug McClure says B, his tongue. We'll go to our contestant, Carrie.
Again, I would say my imagination. It has to be my imagination. It runs off helter-skelter. Have you noticed?
Runs off helter-skelter?
Yeah.
Your
in a quick
imagination.
hurry, yeah.
All right, thank you, Carrie. That completes the answers for our final test question, so let's see how this is scored. The more immediate the association between thought and action, the harder it is for an impulsive person to control it. Thus, if you chose, as our contestant Carrie did, and as Burt Reynolds did, my imagination, you get 0.
Oh,
Is that good or bad to get 0?
Is this how you want to look at it?
If you selected A, my love life, you score 5 points. You said D, my sense of humor, you get 10 points. But if you picked B, as Doug McClure did and as Jessica Walter did, my tongue, you score 15 points. Now it's time for you to total up your points and come up with your final score, and we'll tell you what your total score means. We'll find out how our contestant Carrie compares to our guest stars right after this pause. Well, by now, you should all have totaled your points for the 5 questions, and the final scores for our guests have been tallied and set in place. We'll come back to our contestant, Carrie, in just a moment. But first, let's see how to interpret the final scores of our celebrities and our viewers. If you scored 0 to 10 points, which none of our guests did, you are rated as plotted. Everything you do is so completely thought out and so accurately scheduled that the slightest change gives you a digestive upset, and a real surprise puts you into shock. If your score was 15 to 25 points, and that's you, Bert.
Yes.
That's you.
But,
Turn
that's
your-
me.
Right. You're classified as planned. You do
right.
very little without a clear projection of steps and procedures, and your favorite expression is likely to be, logic wins again. Unless
Logic-
your friends are all nuclear physicists, this can be pretty annoying.
I can't stand that guy you just described.
A total score of 30 to 45 points, and that's you, Doug. That places you in the natural category. You follow your basic instincts, do a fair share of thinking before making a decision, and give in to impulses just often enough to stay fresh and interesting.
I like him. I didn't like
Scoring 50 to 60 points, and that's you, Jessica. That
afraid
puts,
to hear.
that puts you in the unpredictable group. You respond to urges almost as quickly as they arise and are willing to change plans and commitments on the basis of a whim or a whimsy. Now, this is amusing to onlookers, but a little maddening to co-workers or family.
Husbands, too.
If you scored 65 to 75 points, you're described as erratic. You are as reliable as a hummingbird, and making plans with you is about as sensible as betting on the weather. Regardless of age, anyone this impulsive should definitely have a nanny. Now, we know what our celebrities have scored, so let's find out about our contestant. Carrie, since you predicted you would score higher than our celebrity guest, you'll receive $25 for every celebrity you tie or outscore. If you come out higher than all 3 of our celebrities, you'll win $100. And that means to win the $100 today, your score would have to be 55 or more. So let's see what total you come up with.
A score of 70.
A 20. Well, you tied Burt Reynolds. You're just as planned as he is, and you get $25 for the game. That puts you in the planned group, Carrie. You do very little without a clear projection of steps and procedures, and your favorite expression is likely to be logic wins again. We enjoyed having you with us, Carrie. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Bert. If you have a subject you'd like to see tested, why not write into the game in care of your local station so we can have our research staff prepare the questions. Meanwhile, for both fun and information, make it a habit to join us daily. Until the next test, this is Jim McKrell reminding you that the more you know about yourself, the more you stand to learn here on The Game.
These tests are intended strictly for amusement and entertainment. The Game is a Chuck Ferris game show. This program has been recorded.